I'm Whitney Gardner, the illustrator of the RACC Pack series, and this is the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book, graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. On this episode, I chat with Whitney Gardner about her new YA graphic novel, the RACC Pack No. 2, Prince and the Pawper. Please like and subscribe to this website by hitting the subscribe button so you'll be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. Based in Victoria, British Columbia, Whitney Gardner is an author and cartoonist who spends most of her time hidden in the Pacific Northwest, wrapped in a fuzzy sweater. She started drawing stick figures in second grade, and somehow no one's been able to stop her. Before becoming an author, she worked as an art teacher and school librarian, where she fell utterly and completely in love with children's books. Whitney is noted for many books including Long Distance, Your Welcome Universe, Fake Blood, Chaotic Good, and the RACC Pack YA graphic novels. In the rare moment Whitney isn't writing or drawing, she's likely to be reading comics, running D&D campaigns, or roasting coffee. The story of the RACC Pack No. 2 Prince and the Pawper goes like this. The Bin siblings have their sights on the Big Pet Expo in the heart of downtown Toronto. Dusty, Scraps, and ReRe expect to loot the convention for the latest treats, and they definitely don't expect to meet Dusty's doppelganger. Prince the Raccoon is everything Dusty isn't, famous, pampered, and rich. But Prince wants to know what life is like outside his comfy digs and on the streets. So with the Bin's help, Dusty and Prince decide to switch places. At first, Dusty has a great time living it up, but he soon learns the grass isn't always greener on the other side, even when that side has all the snacks he can eat. So without further ado, here's my chat with Whitney Gardner about her new YA graphic novel, the RACC Pack No. 2, Prince and the Pawper. So Whitney Gardner, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Absolutely happy to be here.
I appreciate your time. Before we get going with all the questions, I would like to know, what was the first comic book that you read?
This is a really interesting question. I'm not sure I remember the first comic that I've read, but I do know that, and I was talking with somebody about this recently, that the first comic that really landed with me and made me realize, oh, comics can be something completely different than I ever understood was Ghost World by Daniel Clowes. And I remember reading that as a teenager and thinking, oh my gosh, comics is a whole medium that I didn't think I fully understood, because in my mind, comics were just superhero comics, which are fun. But as a kid, I wasn't super drawn to that. But seeing a book about a teen girl going through real life situations and told as a whole story in one sort of trade paperback blew my mind a little bit and made me think oh, I could tell a story like this, and really inspired me. So it's not the first comic I ever read, I'm sure, but it's the one that I think had the most impact on me early on in my comics journey.
That's great. That's great to inspire you when you're young, but I'm wondering who or what inspires you to create today?
Other than the kids that I write and draw for, they really inspire me. They make me laugh a lot. I love trying to make them laugh. Other inspirations are a lot of my peers coming up around me. Dave Scheid, who writes Mayor Good Boy. Stephanie Cook, who I made this book with, also inspires me to keep going and making books. Just seeing all the incredible children's graphic novels that are coming out in the past few years, it's like a renaissance of comics for kids. And I just love that I get to be a part of that.
Absolutely. And you just hinted about your collaborator, Stephanie Cook. You and Stephanie have another book in the RACC Pack series, No. 2, called Prince and the Pawper. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that story. What is it all about?
Prince and the Pawper is second book in RACC Pack series. We once again join the Binns family, Dusty, ReRe, and Scraps, on a whole new adventure. They find out that a pet expo is in town at the convention center, and we get our big moment of three raccoons in a trench coat decide to break into the pet expo and get all the pet free samples. And when they are there, they notice that there's this like big trend of famous pets and pets that are getting all of this attention. And then there's a big reveal of one of the famous pets at the pet expo is a raccoon named Prince who looks a lot like Dusty, our main character here, and they decide to swap places and see how the other half lives. And Dusty gets to see what it's like to be an Instagram famous raccoon, and Prince gets to see what it's like to be a raccoon out in the wild and scavenging for trash. So that is the plot of Prince and the Pawper. It's very fun.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Sounds like a lot of fun, and I'm sure a lot of mischief going on too in that story. So it sounds
Yes.
quite fun, quite fun. So I mentioned your collaborator, Stephanie Cook, who is a writer on the book, and this is your second book with her. Can you talk a little bit about the collaboration process, how you two work together to make this happen?
Stephanie and I came together. I knew that she was a huge fan of raccoons, dressed up as a raccoon in a Toronto trash bin. Like it's been part of her brand for a long time. And I had this idea of like, what if we made a series about raccoons that heist trash, like the RACC Pack? And she loved it. And so we sat down together and we came up with all the characters together. We sort of plot out the ideas for the stories together. And then Stephanie goes off and writes it, makes it more real, and puts in all the dialogue. But we do collaborate a lot on the story plot points and beats and things like that together.
Ah, that's cool. As the illustrator, I'm wondering, did you do any research about raccoons and maybe even the scenery for the books?
Yes, Rat Pack 1, we were very inspired by the story of the Toronto trash bins that were invented to be raccoon proof. And they hired scientists and did a lot of testing. And they said, this is it. This is the most raccoon proof trash can ever invented. They gave themselves a pat on the back. They had a ribbon cutting. And a week later, the raccoons had figured it out. And I just thought that that was the funniest thing. So we took that as inspiration for raccoons can break into anything. And we did a lot of research about possums and raccoons and how they get along. And for me as the artist, the book series is set in Toronto. So I spend a lot of time on Google Street View, like trying to take in buildings and street signs and certain things that I think people in Toronto will like know and recognize and say like, oh, hey, this is a real place. This person knows what they are referencing.
That's cool. Yeah, to be able to get that down pat, that's kind of tricky, but sounds like you've gotten a good job done there, that's for sure.
It's
Now,
very good at letting me know in the script, like I'm thinking about this park, and then I will go and find images and I'll say, oh, I see why she picked this one. It looks very cool, kind of a thing.
sure. Because you're based on the west coast of Canada. It's not like you could just hop on a plane and come over and do sketches. So it's easy to, when you've got the internet there, I guess, at your disposal.
Yeah, Google Street View has been a very good friend to me.
Great. Now, I wanted to ask you a bit about your artistic style. Can you walk me through your workflow? What sort of tools you use to create your art?
Sure. I do a very, very rough draft of the book after the script is finished on paper, like stick figure sort of level draft, where just to see how many panels are going to be on each page, how the spreads are laid out, when the page turns happen, things like that. Because Stephanie leaves a lot of that up to me, which I appreciate. So I do a very rough little paper draft. And then after that, I do a sort of sketchy, more pencils type draft of the book, which that I send to our editor and our publisher and art director, and they have a look at it. And that's where we get our first round of notes. And I do that on a Cintiq on my computer. That way, if there's changes, it's very easy to make changes when you're working digitally. And then I'll go ahead and after I get all my notes, I do inks and then colors. And at each level, our editor and art director are weighing in with their thoughts.
And that's all done digitally, that last process you were talking about.
Oh, yes, I do. I call it inks, even though it's digital inks. But yes, every step of the way I'm on a tablet. Yeah.
And it makes it a lot easier if you got to make changes or if you get some feedback and saying, hey, just touch this up or something like that.
Yes, and schedules for, traditional publishers, Simon & Schuster is great, but they tend to be a little tight. So when you're working digitally, it just makes things much more streamlined and easier to change things on the fly.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Because this is the second book in the series, I wanted to ask you, did you do anything to challenge yourself to make it fresh and new when you were going through the process of making it?
I think one of the biggest things Stephanie and I have done working on this series, knowing that each book is going to be a heist of some sort, is we've watched so many heist movies. We've tried to do the things where, like, here are the tropes that we want to avoid, that we feel are played out, and here are the ones that we want to like sprinkle in as little Easter eggs to people who love the genre of heists and will recognize. And the second book became less of a like breaking in heist and more of a like a tower heist where we escape from a condo in downtown Toronto. So it was fun to think of like how to get a raccoon out of a skyrise and without causing too much of a drama.
Did any famous movies inspire you for that? Maybe Tom Cruise Mission Impossible or something like that?
Oh, we definitely watched Tom Cruise Mission Impossible. And one of the films that we always reference when we talk about it, I think it rewired both of our brains, is the heist movie Top Copy. I think it's like the blueprint for a lot of heist movies, and we just sort of fell in love with it. So every now and again, we'll sprinkle a Top Copy reference in whenever we can.
Nice. Now, we've been talking about the RACC Pack Volume 2, Prince and the Pawper. So we got to ask you, what's your next project that you can talk about?
There may be some more RACC Pack on the way. I don't know how much I can say about that. My next project is a solo graphic novel, a middle grade graphic novel that I wrote and illustrated. It's called Free Piano, Not Haunted, and that's coming out in the summer on July 1st.
Wow, that sounds good. Can you give us just a little hint about what the story's about?
It's about a girl who finds a piano on the street with a sign that says Free Piano, Not Haunted. And turns out that it's not as not haunted as the sign suggests. It's a Prophet 5 synthesizer, and it is haunted by the ghost of a pop star, an 80s pop star. The main character sort of struggles with the idea of, should I make art or music to appeal to the masses online and get more followers, or should I be making art for just myself, sort of a thing?
Ah, that's the age-old challenge for artists, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a very new challenge where you're just like, am I trying to appease an audience? Does it matter how many followers I have? Or why am I doing this? Am I doing this for them or am I doing this for me? Kind of a
Hmm.
thing.
Very good. Well, sounds like you got a lot of stuff on the go. So I'm wondering, do you have any conventions or festivals also lined up to help with the promotion this year?
None for me just yet, but Stephanie and I are doing a lot of online library and school visits. So if any of your listeners are interested, definitely reach out and we can maybe schedule something for your school or your library.
That's a great thing for sure. So with everything you have on the go, where do you recommend that people go online to find out more about you and your future work?
My website is heywhitney.com. And you could also find me on Blue Sky, and my handle there is Hey Whitney.
Thanks to Whitney for the chat. You can discover more about Whitney online at heywhitney.com and on Instagram at instagram.com/heywhitneywrites. And thank you for tuning in to the True North Country Comics podcast. I invite you to visit the True North Country Comics website to listen to all the conversations to discover more about insights into creating comic books and graphic novels. I also encourage you to subscribe via the website so you'll be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can follow along True North Country Comics on most social media sites. And I encourage you to send any and all feedback to john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. Thanks for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2025.